Hello, rock hounds, fossil finders, flint nappers, and fellow YouTubians. I sincerely hope that Frank P. Numis Metals does not get upset with me for borrowing his introduction style. I really appreciate it. I like his introduction, which is why I'm borrowing it. So hopefully he doesn't mind. I think I'm just going to be using it for this series anyway. So this is part 2 in a series highlighting stone artifacts, napped tools of the North American Native Americans. And this part 2 of the series, I may break into a couple of sub-parts. So the first one will probably be about 10 minutes. And if you are extremely interested and have enjoyed what you've seen and want to see more, then come on back for part 2 of part 2, or maybe even a part 3. But I'm going to try and keep the highlights here in part 1 so that if you just want the general introduction, then you will have gotten it already. Okay? So what I'm highlighting, for those who haven't guessed, well, you've read the title, so I think most of you already know, are Uniface Scrapers. And I'll start with this lovely one right here to explain and show what a Uniface Scraper is. A Uniface Scraper is one that has a flat side where it was broken, during a compression strike. Well, I call it a compression strike. A strike that the toolmaker used when they struck the rock. It hit the rock and it split it right here. And then from the other breaks that they put into it, or if this is the way it came, thin enough that they could work it down, they work it on this side. All the flakes come off of this side. So it gives this side a rounded appearance in many cases, and the other side stays a flat, uniform, single break. And this is a lovely example, both in the stone and in the evenness of the edges, the evenness on top, and the fine detail, if I can get in there, on the flaking. Like really some magnificent stonework, napping work, flaking that they've done to get these nice, smooth, even edges. So most of these Uniface scrapers, it's going to be speculated or surmised or studied and, I guess in some cases known what these were used for. They would use them for scraping hides, for scraping plant materials, whether that be wood, to do woodworking things. They could have used these on their pottery after they had done the basic surface. They could have used these to work patterns in or to scrape off material. Anything that we might use some type of a spatula or a knife for these days, they could have used these scrapers for. They have a sharp enough edge, that you could use them for a knife. So a very multi-tool, used widely, extensively by Native Americans. All right. So if you'll take a look, I've done a bit of a job of organizing these into certain shape patterns. We've got some oval ones here, longer ones with slightly more pointed ends here. Crescent moon shapes is what I call these. So kind of a flat side here, rounded here. Rounded ones that are for the most part round, Then you have some odd shapes. And then these, they're kind of like the crescent moons, but they're taller or wider in the crescent part. And it's almost like on this one, it almost has four sides. 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, you have a little bit flatter top part on some of these. All right, so let's have a look at some of the smallest and some of the largest ones just to get us introduced to what they could do with these in making these different tools and maybe even what they could have been used for. This one is a rounded one. I find it very unique. Again, I think they were just working with what they had, but you have a flake that came out here and here, almost symmetrically, and then this was a little bit rougher, but they were able to get, you know, this down enough so that it could be used. And then they, you know, had a flat uniface side, and then they could work the stone to the nice edge on this side. All right. We have some larger ones like this one. Has a nice flat uniface side there. Was worked here. You know, see how large this one is? Fits in your hand. You know, a bigger tool for scraping hide or even for chopping wood. You know, they've been used different ways. Fits in the hand very well. Here's a very large example of just kind of the oval or rounded ones. Usually they're not this big, but one stone worker or a village decided this is what they needed, so this is what they made. Here's another very unique large example. You know, has a nice curvature on that side to the stone. A little bit of a point here, but that's the cortex, the outside of the stone, so not quite a point. And then they worked it all the way around. This might be a good one for seeing, you know, down closer to the edge you have the finer stonework, and then up and away from it, for the most part, you have larger flakes. This one is one of my favorite examples, unique examples, because it has a very pointed end on both ends. You know, they were very they made it up in their mind, and so they worked it out so that both ends had nice pointed ends that I'm sure they used for puncturing and making small holes or cavities or whatever, and whatever they were working into. You know, possibly even something like a walnut tool for getting out the meat from the walnut, with nice working along that edge. All right, this one over here is a very good example, and I have another one similar to it, where you had a big flake that came off, and so it has too much of a curve to it, maybe to be used in making a arrowhead, but instead they work this edge right there, they work this edge right there. I think that's it, and maybe a little bit of work right there. They work these two edges, so this is now a large, you know, and it actually fits very well in the hand, cutting tool. And it's just made, you know, with very little refining work, just from a big flake. This is a large one that has that broken end. I think it probably came like that, but it could have been broken later on. Since it's so flat, I don't think that this was an axe or a grubbing tool, but it could have been, and that could have been where it got broken. It could have been hafted, and this is the just the hoe end of the grubbing tool, but it's Uniface, so it fits in the Uniface Scraper category. And then we have some small ones. I love this little guy right here. If I can get you to focus, there we go. It's got one sharpened, kind of pointed corner. Nice triangular, but all sides have been worked at least somewhat. I like this one. This is chunky. This one's definitely a chunky right here. For the silver stackers, you know, there's something to be said about a chunky, thick piece of silver. Just the way it feels in your hand and everything. It's pretty unique. And this one is a very thick, you know, it broke right there, either before or after it was worked into a tool. But it was, you know, worked down, has some nice edges along there, but just a lot thicker than what you usually see. This one right here is another flake where very little work was done, you know, once it broke out in the long, thin flake shape. To change the shape of it more, they just put the edge on it. They did a lot of work right there. And from this side here to put two edges on it to make it a nice little knife or cutting tool. Here's another one similar that you can see. If I can get it to focus. Oh my, there we go. Nice uniface edge on that side, a little bit of flaking taken out right there along the edge. And then these, I want to highlight these before we end this video. These tools have been worked into specific tools. I think that's a large area for working, scraping, smoothing out, rounding out a atlatl shaft, an arrow, or a spear shaft, and this one for some type of smaller shaft or tool, maybe for working something down into bone, down into a needle. Could have used that part right there. This one, which I call the heart uniface scraper, it's my little heart example, but it definitely has a cavity or a little valley right there that could have been and would have been used to straighten and sharpen and smooth out, you know, some type of a long cylindrical shaft-like tool. And then this one, you know, either they were just working on their flint knapping skills, or those are three different, you know, valleys or channels for sharpening and working shafts down to the right shape. Very unique. So lots of stuff here. If you are still interested and want to see more, come on back for part 2 of this part 2 in the series. Thanks for watching. Leave your comments, questions below. I appreciate it, guys. Y'all have a good one. Bye-bye.